Thanks everyone for joining today's webinar. Just by way of introduction, my name is Christy and I'm Customer Success Manager here at Deputy. So my role here is really to make sure that you guys feel empowered to use the platform through our monthly webinars. So I know it's a beautiful day today, so I'm glad you guys are all able to join. So for today's webinar, we're going to be discussing Deputy's Business Insights tool, which is our response to customers' growing need to evaluate, surface, and measure meaningful data in your business. So we'll be going over the basics on how to set this up with your business, how to gather information, and how to add things like weekly wage budgets, as well as input sales metrics to track trends and make smart business decisions. So throughout this webinar, we will be touching on sales data, but if that's not part of your business, don't worry. We will be covering plenty of other stats that you may find valuable, like budgeting or working to targets or wages for hours. So if you guys have any questions as the webinar is running, please feel free to use our Q&A section, not the chat, to ask them. So along the way, Gary, our technical learning designer, who many of you recognize, will be answering them. And we'll also have some time towards the end for our webinar Q&A. And as always, we will be sharing a recording of this webinar and the deck that we go through, so you can have that on hand for future use. So why Business Insights? Before we get into the platform, I just want to briefly summarize what Deputy's Business Insights tool does, just in case there are any newcomers or you're not really familiar with what this is. So in a nutshell, the Business Insights and budgeting tools in Deputy help our customers assess their employee costs against their budget so they can make cost-efficient decisions. So especially during these times where, things are a bit uncertain, Deputy's tools can help business owners make smart decisions and can track things like wages against their budget, or make staffing decisions based on sales metrics or other metrics, such as footfall, weather forecasts, and historically busy or quieter periods. Before we jump into the platform, I'd like to highlight that there are a few fundamentals that come with Business Insights. So they're here floating around in these bubbles, but a few of them include wage costs, forecasting, sales data, weekly hour totals, reporting, and so on. So we'll cover them today in our walkthrough of the platform. And throughout our webinar, we'll also have recap sessions. So we'll be reminded of what we went through and just get a little bit of a recap of what we chatted about. So how does this look in the platform? Let's dive in. So right now, you're looking at my Deputy screen as a manager would in their desktop of the web portal. So I will note that I'm using Google Chrome, which is our preferred browser, and we don't support Internet Explorer. Perhaps you've heard that Microsoft is sunsetting that, but browsers like Safari and Firefox are okay. Just make sure your team members are using something like that and not Internet Explorer. So to get started with Business Insights, you must either be a system admin or a location manager, as these are the only access levels that you can see wages and reporting. So to use the tool as a prerequisite, you should have your employees' wages input into Deputy, and that way you can see what the costs are against each individual, plus factor in what they've clocked in and their work hours as well. That's really like the crux of Business Insights. So to do this, we're going to navigate to the People tab where all this information is stored. And just as a reminder, anytime you're making any employee-related choices, editing anything that relates to your staff, this will always live in the People tab. So let's navigate there right now, right over here in the top. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at people's wages or add their wages. So just as a reminder, there's two ways you can do this. The first way, pretty straightforward, is just clicking on an employee, navigating to edit profile, clicking on their employment details, and entering their pay rates. So you can choose their pay rates here, whether it's hourly, salaried, what have you, and just input that information right there. Alternatively, if you want to do this to a bulk of individuals that have certain or the same parameters held against them, you can select multiple people or choose a whole bunch of them with this button right here. Click on bulk actions, and then you can set rates. And from here, you're able to choose the different rates that might apply to them, throw that information in there, and that will be updated in their profile. So the Deputy system will understand what the wages are per employee. All right. So that's the prerequisite to actually use, the Business Insights tool. So now let's take a look at how this might show up in the scheduling tab. So let me just close this real quick. All right. So while we're in the scheduling tab, you'll see that I have a roster of individuals scheduled to work for this week. If we took a look at the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see all the employees that I have within this location. So you'll see with each individual underneath, there's a number that indicates the number of hours they're working, as well as the pay that's associated with them. So this is for this current week. I will say if you switch between weeks, like previous weeks or future weeks, using this date toggle right here, you'll be able to see the pay and hours for those folks as well. So if I drag and drop people into certain areas, you'll see that the hours as well as the dollars associated, or pounds rather, associated with the individuals on the left-hand side are increasing. So in Deputy, we have the ability to track how many hours someone works and the spend per employee. So if I were to click on any of these individuals, so I'll just use this person as an example. If I clicked on any of these individuals, I'd be able to see the total number of hours they're working this week, along with their pay information and the total cost for this person as well. So I think that this left-hand side bar is extremely helpful because it gives you a good idea of who's working what, when, what hours, whether or not certain folks are working too many hours or too few hours. It's a great way to track whether or not you should be scheduling certain people more or giving other folks less shifts. But I will say, if you want to make sure you avoid overworking certain folks, you can also set up a stress profile for them, and that is simply a guardrail for making sure people don't work over their contracted hours. So that's where the employee information lives, the information that's held against their hours as well as their pay. But if we want to see how this works in an overall setting, we do have a button here called the stats button, and this will show you a breakdown of the numbers per day. So if I click on this, we'll see a few things and we'll go over it step by step. So on the left-hand side right here, you'll see the total number of hours that my employees are working this week, the total wages, sales numbers, and a labor percentage as well. If we hover over this, we'll also get a more detailed breakdown of what those numbers are. So in this section, you might notice that I have my actual hours worked here, but there's also a grayed out number. So the grayed out number is the budget that I've set for myself, and we'll go over how to set that up in a quick second. But just going back here real quick, if we take a look at our stats bar, we'll be able to see all these statistics held against the week. I will note that right now we're seeing this as a weekly statistic, but we're also able to view this over 2 weeks or a month. Simply change the view through this little toggle right here, and we're able to see either less or more information. All right. So within the stats panel, we have a few different things visible to us. So we're able to see the scheduled wages per day. We're able to see the total number of scheduled hours being worked that day. We'll be able to see a labor percentage. So here, that would be 35.5%. Which is calculated by dividing the total labor costs over total sales. And so ideally, you should have more sales than a labor cost to remain profitable. So it's important to note here that the stats panel will only show information on what is currently in view in the schedule section. So here, I have different areas, right? But if I hit certain areas or showed certain areas, those stats would show up in the screen as well. So that's really handy if you want to focus on stats for a specific area or two. Similarly, we could do this as one employee's data or a few employees. Just change to the employee view and this toggle right here. And the stats panel will show you the kind of filters that you've set up. All right. So as I mentioned before, if you hover over any of these days, you'll see a detailed breakdown of wages, sales numbers, and any forecast data you may have put in. So along with the actual stats bar, sorry, Gary, did you raise your hand?
I did. Sorry, I didn't realize that I would interrupt you so much.
Oh,
your mic is rubbing on your shirt. I bet. I think.
apologies. Okay.
So
Sorry.
Just scratching a lot. Just wanted
Oh,
to
sorry.
see if you can.
Is this better?
Yeah.
Okay, my apologies. All right. Where was I? Let's see. All right. So along the stats bar, you'll see a little bit of information right here. So you'll see these graphs and lines. So these are just a visual representation of your metrics, which you can also see a legend for under the metrics button right here. So if you deselected any of these, so I'll just get rid of wages and sales for a sec, you'll see that these lines have changed. And so if I reselect them, they will show back up on the screen. So within each cube, you're able to see those numbers for the day. There may be sales numbers, wages, etc. But like I said earlier, if you hover over it, it'll show you a detailed breakdown. So what I can show you actually is a real life example for a hospitality customer that uses sales data rather heavily. So let me just pull that up right here. As you'll see here, this customer uses sales data pretty heavily, and you see that the metrics show that. So you'll see that there are a lot of highs and lows, dips and highs, and that's just indicative of their sales and their staffing statistics. So now that we've seen where these metrics show up or they're displayed in the platform, we should now head to the section of Deputy, where these statistics live, and we can go over how to actually set it up. So this area is where we might change, edit, or add the numbers that will show up in your stats panel. And there are two ways to access this, but they're both in the scheduling screen. So the first one would be either under the stats button to click on View Business Insights. So that's kind of where our settings live, or we can click on that here as well. So there's two options. So I'll just click on this, and we'll navigate to the Business Insights part of the platform. So now that we're here, just as an overview, this is where we can add information on budgets, sales, and create labor models. So if you look at the left-hand side, we have three things going on. We have our budgets right here, our metrics right here, and our staff at the bottom as well. So first of all, let's look at budgets, which is where you might set a number for a budget for your weekly wages that week, or for hours as well. So first off, let's take a look at the weekly wage budget. This is where you put your wages budget for the week. So this could be changed across dates. If you have different wages for different seasons of your business, you can edit it that way. And that's simply through this little date toggle right here, moving forward or backwards. So with the weekly wage budget, there are a few different columns for us to look at. On the left-hand side, you'll see the dates of the week. That's pretty straightforward. We'll see our budgeted wages. So that would be the budget that we have for the wages for this week. As a business owner, you probably have a number in mind of what that ballpark should be. So you can simply edit it by clicking on this button at the bottom right here, and then changing or editing that number. Once you're done, just click on the blue tick, and it'll update. We also have our scheduled wages, and this is where your scheduled wages will live. That is wages that you've already rostered into the schedule tab or the scheduling system. And this usually is shown as a breakdown per day. And on the last column, you'll see we have a variance column. And that simply shows the difference between your scheduled and your budgeted wages. So if it's green, that's a good sign. It shows that you are under budget and you're remaining profitable. If there are any red numbers, that means you are going over your budget. And so you can think about that accordingly. So if I hover over any of these numbers right here, you'll see that there's a percentage associated with that. And what that means, it just shows you your variance as a percentage to show you how much over or under budget you might be. All right. If we want to take a look at the weekly hour budget, that is, it's a simple, it's pretty straightforward, and it's similar to the weekly wage budget, but instead of the wages, we're thinking about the hours worked per week by our employees. So if I click on this, I'll be able to see a similar setup. So our date is on the left-hand side. We've got our hours budget at the bottom right here, our scheduled hours, and our variance. So similarly, like before, simply click on the bottom here to edit that number. And that would simply be your idea of what the desired number of hours per week this should be. The scheduled section will show you the actual scheduled hours of your employees that are in your roster. And then the variance, again, shows you that discrepancy between the two. And I will note, if you don't want to track this as a weekly hour budget, you can also set this to days. And so how you would do that is by clicking on hours, budget settings, click on that right there, change it to daily and save it out. I'll just do that right now. And from there, you're able to edit these numbers day by day. So that just gives you a bit more flexibility if you don't want to do this by week. And if you want to do it daily, you have that option as well. And so that is our budgeting section. Now let's go to our sales metrics. So this area, which you can click on right here, will show you your sales information. And so there are a few different columns that we can take a look at. So the first one, obviously, is our date. The second would be a forecast. And this is a sale forecast generated by Deputy based on your past data and Deputy forecasting settings, which can be defined by clicking on the settings button in the bottom left-hand side right here. So this is Deputy's calculation of what your sales might be based on past sales data. After that, we have our manager forecast, and this is where your business manager's forecast of what sales might be, and you can edit this information. We have a column for our actuals. So this is where you add like actual sales data, either manually or automatically through one of our POS integrations like Square or Revel. And lastly, again, we have our variance column. So this is where we have a calculation for any variances between your forecasted and actual data. So I will say, of all the columns that you see here, probably the ones that you want to pay the most attention to are the Deputy forecast, your actuals, and your variance. So the Deputy forecast is a helpful tool to have, and it's an algorithm that predicts what your sales data might be based on past real-life data. So as a business manager or owner, you can use Deputy's forecast, which uses historical information to predict what sales might be and inform these staffing decisions as well. So just like before, we're able to toggle this view across weeks, days, months, in the past and the future, simply by clicking on these drop downs or moving forward and backwards with weeks. So if we want to edit this information, we can do that simply by clicking on the Edit Data button right here. And from here, we're able to see the 3 tabs that were in the columns earlier. So the Deputy forecast is not something you can edit. Like I said previously, that is Deputy's forecast of your sales based on precedent information. So the 2 areas you probably would be editing is your manager forecast, which is where the manager might predict what sales numbers might be, or the actuals. So I will say, to edit this information, it's pretty straightforward. You can either add them in hour by hour, or if that's a bit too much work, you can always use the total top button right here. So once you edit this number, you'll see that it will average across all your working hours for your business that you've set up in your location settings, and it'll just average that out. I will also note that this does operate like an Excel spreadsheet. So if you have any working files or you are using an Excel to build this information out, you can simply click it, drag it, copy it, and paste it into the sales forecast right here. So that just makes it really easy. You don't have to type it all in every single time. And once you're done, simply save it out right here in the top right-hand corner of your screen. And you'll be able to see this information in the dashboard that we were in earlier. So I will note, sales information is not the only metric that we can measure. So if you see here in the main dashboard, under this button right here, we can add a metric. So this might be something like foot traffic, items sold, whatever statistics are important to your business. Once you create a new metric, you can manipulate it just like we did here. You can edit it just like we did earlier in that spreadsheet, and then you can change those numbers and get that updated in real time. So just to recap what we went over. So within the pay and stats area, first of all, we went over the prerequisite of having employee wages set up in the People tab, so this information will cascade into your Scheduling tab. We saw that when we added or removed people from the scheduling roster, the costs and their hours either increased or decreased. We took a look at the stats button and saw a weekly total of hours worked, wages, sales numbers, and a labor percentage. That is the total labor cost over total sales. And lastly, we saw a breakdown of these statistics across days and weeks in their stats panel. So just as a reminder, here I've added a legend where you can see the actual definitions for each of these detailed statistics. I won't go over it right now, but once we circulate the deck and a recording of the webinar afterwards, you can take a look and see what each of these terms actually means. So within business insights and budgeting, we saw how to budget wages across weeks. We learned how to input a weekly wage budget. That is to input a wage budget to see how this compares to our wages for the week. And we did the same thing for our hours. So we took a look at our hourly budget, which lets us compare our budgeted hours and how this compares to the hours we scheduled for the week as well. And then we took a look at our sales metrics, which we used to enter our sales data. And we learned how to edit this data, took a look at our totals, manager forecast, and actual sales data. We learned how to add a new metric, just in case we don't want to look at sales and we have other statistics like foot traffic or items sold. Just as a recap, all the information that we input into the business insights part of the platform will be visible in our stats bar, which is in the scheduling page. So that's just a quick recap of what we have gone through so far. Hope you guys are still with us. But now we're going to go back to Deputy and cover just a few more things about the platform. All right. So within Deputy and our Business Insights tool, there are a few more things I'd like to touch on. The first one being a labor model, which relates to our auto scheduling and smart scheduling, and then we'll go into reporting as well. So to provide an overview of what Deputy's labor modeling is, it is Deputy's way of building a smart schedule for you based on previous sales data. So it uses precedent sales data to make an informed and cost-efficient decision on how many shifts to create, and uses this information to auto-build shift structures if you choose to do so. So I will note that it's not necessary to use this while scheduling. At the end of the day, as a business manager, you have a better idea than the algorithm of who to staff and when. However, we do like to provide options for our customers. So if they'd like to take a stab at smart scheduling, they can do so. And I will say, if you are a growing business and you have 100+ employees, this is probably going to be quite helpful because you might not want to be, dragging and dropping 100 individuals into your scheduling tab. So how does this look in the platform? So first of all, we need to make sure that we have sales data from the past, which is what Deputy will use to take a look at before building a labor model. Next, we can just navigate to the staff section on the left-hand side, click on labor model, and from here, we can set up a new labor model. So how you do this is I already have one set up just for your reference, but if we were to start a new one, we click on new role. From here, we have a few different options available to us. For example, under coverage, where it says linear and range, that simply shows how flexible we want to be when the system builds our model. For example, if we choose linear, it'll give us harder parameters around how many people to staff and around what costs. If we clicked on range, it would give us a little bit more flexibility and there's a bit more variability with that. But for now, let's click on linear. We would choose our area. And what this means is this will be the area that Deputy will analyze in order to add more rosters to this area. So if we were in a scenario where you were building this out for your whole business, ostensibly you would be creating different labor rules for different areas in your platform. So if I clicked on this, you'd be able to see all the different areas in my business. Previously, I had one for front desk, so why don't we do one for nurse instead? And we would just choose the sales forecast metric. All right. We would choose the minimum number of individuals you want staff for that area, and we would add the dollar amount in sales per hour to add one nurse. So, and the maximum being 3 nurses, then we can save that out. And then we'll return to the dashboard, and we'll see that this is an active rule that we have right here. So if we want to see this in action, what we can do is run the labor model, for this week. And what it's doing is it's calculating how many rosters or hours should be scheduled based on the rules we created, as well as the sales information that we have, in the system. So we say, okay, that's fine. And so to see this in action, we have to navigate back to our scheduling tab. And this is where we would see the actual labor model running, that is creating those rosters to fill the demand for our sales data that we've put into the system. So if we click on schedule and we go to auto, if we clicked on auto build shift structure, we choose a shift length based on required staff and we build those shifts. Right now, the deputy system is taking that labor model we created into account and creating an appropriate number of empty shifts. And from there, we're able to drag and drop our employees into these areas. And that just makes scheduling a little bit easier if you have a ton of different employees. So it's thinking right now, so we'll give it a second. But I will note, the more detailed information you have or you can add to your labor model, the more valuable the outcome is. So please choose at least 2 or 3 length of shifts that you would expect to need in a day, and then put them in order of need. So you'll see here that after we ran our labor model, clearly I was understaffing because a large number of staffs have appeared in our scheduling. So in both our nurse system and our front desk system, the system took a look at my sales data and then made a smart decision about how many shifts I should have per day, per area in this section. So I will note, building a labor model is not necessary to schedule shifts, right? As a business manager, you probably have a good understanding of what the business needs and when it's busy and when you need to staff more people. But I will say it is a nice tool to have if you ever need to utilize our auto build shift structure tool. And if you have tons of different staff and you can't really, you might not have the time to drag and drop like 100 folks into your schedule, this is a nice tool to use. As I mentioned before, just a prerequisite, you must have previous sales data for a system to read. And our recommendation is to utilize this auto build function to build an optimized schedule, a smart schedule. Make some manual tweaks if you see that things are off, or perhaps as a business owner, you have your own choices about how to do things. And we'd recommend you save this out as a template for future use. That way, you don't have to make this from scratch each time. And just as a reminder of how to create this as a template, click on this button right here next to copy shifts, save this out as a template, and you can call this smart schedule along with your date range or whatever name you want to give it. Hit enter, and then you can save that out. Okay. And in the future, if you ever want to reload that template, simply navigate to the same area, click on load template, and you will have that smart schedule that was created with your labor model. All right, so that is basically business insights in a nutshell. We've gone over the stats panel, budgeting, sales, wages, creating a labor model. And the last thing I want to touch on is reporting. So lastly, we do have a report that utilizes the sales data we have in the platform. So to see this, navigate to reports, which is at the top right here. We give it a sec to load and we scroll down. We'll be able to see our schedules versus timesheets versus sales report. So this report shows you your employees and their costs, along with the number of scheduled hours they've worked in comparison to any sales data you have. So just as an overview right here, we can see in the blue our rostered hours, in green our timesheet hours. Unfortunately, none of my employees have clocked in, so that's why it's at the bottom. But we can also see a sales number as well. And so that will show you where you are in regards to your rostered hours versus your sales. And so if we clicked into this, we'd be able to see a detailed breakdown of our employees' costs, the time they're working, as well as any sales data. So in general, this is a great report to look at if you want to see any total hours worked, the costs associated with an area of business, a specific employee, or locations in your business. So we take a look at the different columns right here. We've got our areas, our scheduled hours, and our scheduled costs. So that just gives you a good idea of what each employee is doing or what the breakdown is by area. I will say you can also toggle this by locations, by area. So let's just say I chose this. I'd be able to see it for this area in particular, as well as specific employees on this dropdown, and a date range as well. So toggling between these different filters will give you an idea of what's going on in those specific parts of your business in real time. So that's the schedule versus timesheets versus sales report. And just to recap what we went over one more time. We took a look at our labor model, which is a Deputy's tool that uses precedent sales data to make an informed and cost-efficient decision on how many shifts to create and how to use this information to auto-build shift structures. So we took a look at how to set this up in the platform and apply it to our smart scheduling with the understanding that you must have previous sales data to run this labor model. So just as a reminder, I've also included a TLDR, which is too long, didn't read, of the steps you need to follow in case you want to build this yourself. So creating the role, adding your parameters, creating and running the labor model, then navigating to the schedule page where you go to auto build shift structure, and those shifts will show up. And we also took a look at our reporting, which is related to business insights, and that is the schedule versus timesheets versus sales report, which shows us a financial guide on employee costs versus sales. So we took a look at the total rostered hours versus the number of actual hours worked in comparison to sales data, and we also saw a graph of how this might look across our rostered hours, our sales, and timesheet hours as well. And that is it for our Business Insights and Budgeting Masterclass. We hope you left with a better understanding of Deputy's budgeting tools and the different ways that we can utilize them in the platform. So I think we have some extra time. So let's just see if we have any Q&As in the chat that we can answer. And I see that while I was running the webinar, Gary has fielded a lot of questions. So thank you.
Yes, I've been typing away furiously. There's actually a couple that, if it's okay, Christy, I'd like to answer live because a few people have asked a similar question. The first one is just about integrations in general. Do you integrate with this company, that company, etc.? We do have some pre-built integrations for sales data and other platforms. You can find that on our website. I mean, it is kind of ever changing, so. But any major changes would obviously get announced to customers. But do keep an eye on the UK website for which integrations we do have live working versions for. Having said that, if you have a point of sale system that you're thinking of getting, or you already have installed, and it's not amongst our pre-built integrations, our official ones, there is still a good chance that we can sync the sales data and any other data points really using our open API connection. So quite often we're happy to give this information out to anyone, even the POS companies that you work with directly, so that I'm sure they'll have a technical person who can look it up and go through the options and see how to pull the data from their platform and put it into Deputy. Now I'm going to paste the article about this. Well, actually, it's an entire document. I mean, it's very extensive. And feel free to share this with whoever you need. I've just put it in the chat box there. So that's the document about the Open API. And also, someone was asking about bulk uploading CSV information. So if you have extracted your sales data over whatever time period from your current POS system, and you want to get that into Deputy in a kind of slightly more manual process, you can actually do that through the Dropbox integration, which once you have set that up, will actually automatically upload thereafter. So I'm going to paste the help article to set that up in the chat box as well. I've just popped that in there. And then there's a couple more questions here. There was one I actually wanted to show because it's Helen's asking, can you set minimum contracted hours, say 30, and can it warn us if they haven't fulfilled their contract? Now, this is a brand new feature that has just been introduced, Helen. You'll probably be pleased to know. So what I can do, actually, Christy, do you mind if I share my screen?
Sure.
And I'll just show you, Helen, where that is, and everyone else, you might be interested in seeing this. So desktop. Yep. Okay, one sec, let me get rid of these boxes. Okay, can you see my account okay? Is that showing?
Yep.
All right. Now, if you go into someone's profile and you go to edit profile, this should be live in everyone's accounts now. If you go to employment details, you see there's a new tab here called working hours. So it's next to pay. In fact, if you're on pay details, if you scroll down, you'll get there. So this is where you can set up a work period for someone, either weekly, and you can or 2 weekly, I think it is. These are coming soon. Okay, so at the moment, I mean, thankfully, this is probably the most likely that people are going to choose anyway. You can say what day the work period starts on, and then you can give, your 30 hours. So once that's saved, this is now going to be reflected when you schedule them. So when we go over to the schedule page, I'm just going to refresh the page here. And I always recommend that if you've made like a change in someone's profile and then you go direct to the schedule page, just give the whole page a refresh just in case it hasn't quite instigated it. So can you see now Chris here has a little down arrow next to his name. So this means, in fact, to area view. When I hover over this now, you can see he's under his agreed hours. So you've got this handy little indicator, the down arrow, obviously meaning, he's below what his agreed hours are. But as you schedule him, let's hope he's trained for these things, but he's not. Get to work. Okay, can you see like 12? So if I now just copy this and just give him a few more shifts, let's take it over 30. You see now the arrow's up and it shows you how many hours he is above. Now, you're not going to get an immediate pop-up once you've done it. That will come in future iterations of this. Okay, once something's created, we generally like to get out there as soon as possible and then just keep improving upon it, so people can get the value straight away, and then we can just keep improving. And we know that would be good to have, so that will be coming. But you can see here now, just a very quick visual indicator that he is over and above his contracted hours or his agreed hours. Another handy way to see who's going over and above is to use the little filter here and do it by total hours. This will change it top to bottom, who's got the fewest and the least, so you can quickly see all of these people are over their agreed hours. All right, so hopefully that's helpful there. Let's have a look at a couple of other questions here. That was done. Oh,
Gary, I think there was one question about varied rates across employees, so like rates by area.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened to that question. I think I said I was going to.
Yeah, it's in the Q&A.
I pressed the answer, but I actually didn't mean to. But yeah, so someone was asking about, we have different employees that earn different amounts depending on what area they work in or what job role they do. So as long as you have those job roles as separate areas, then you can give different people different rates depending on what area they work in, they clock time in. So same area, go to edit profile, we'll go back to employment details, and in the employment type, in the pay rate section, if you click the drop down, you can see one option is called area of work. So this is where you can put their regular pay rates in, which is independent of where they actually end up working. So what this means is Barry here will earn £10 an hour in any area that he's scheduled in, unless he works, and then that's where you do the different ones. So I'm going to say if he works in this area, his rate is £12 an hour. And you can just keep doing these ad infinitum. So I can just add another one here. If he does a cover shift at the Claremont Clinic, he gets 15. and you can just keep adding them like that. So that's how to give someone different pay rates depending on what role they're doing. So like I say, as long as you have, and if it is the same pay rate, you can add, multiple ones like this, so you don't have to keep doing new ones for the same rates. It's only if the rate is different, you have to do different groups.
I will note that let's just say you have Barry in the MRI room and he earns 12 pounds. You could have Sally in the same MRI room and she could be earning more than 12 pounds. So this number is tied to the individual, not the actual area itself, but the deputy assistant will take that into account. So you can have more flexibility with your individual folks as well as the areas they're working in.
Yeah. Let's see. Any more questions here? Megan says, will you be looking to conduct more webinars on different areas of the platform, i.e. lead management? Well, yes, Megan, these are monthly customer webinars. We have actually covered leave management. I think it was 2 webinars ago. So pretty recently, Christy did a lovely leave management webinar, and that you can find that and more previous webinars on our Learning Center. So let me just show you where that is. If you go to deputy.com/training, I'm going to paste this in the chat box as well. And if you scroll down here, you can see, go to our next training library. Go to our next training library. So I'm reading 2 buttons at the same time there. And if you scroll down, you can find webinar trainings here. So these are the previous ones that we've recorded over the last year or so. And you can see 2 ago where the leave management is the leave management webinar. So this is pretty bang up to date. So that's where you can find that one. In fact, I'm going to be even more helpful here, and I'm just going to paste that one just for you there, Megan. There you go. So yeah, these are typically, we run these on the last Thursday of each month at 11 a.m. So yeah, look out for the invites. Jilly Pollock asks, do breaks show in hours worked? Yes, if it's unpaid, then yes, I think so.
Yes, but if it's paid, then that doesn't really contribute to the hours they've worked, so that would be deducted from the number of hours.
What is timesheet export code field for? That is, generally people use that for the payroll ID number. I know that we have a funny term for it here, timesheet export code, but say you use like Sage or something, and or your payroll platform has a unique identifier of a number, or it could be like a mixture of numerals and letters, or it could even be someone's full name. It's the way that you identify an employee for payroll. So that's what, so you could say Gary Harper is, number 231 or whatever. Bruce says, can you export to Sage 200? Yes. If you go to when you have your timesheets ready to go, you will need to do a little bit of configuration. In fact, Bruce, I'm gonna. There's a lot of links today, isn't there? There is an article about this with a very helpful video. You'll have to excuse the old school deputy graphics. This was a pre-brand refresh. There you go, Bruce. That is how to set it up. But it's also, once you have set it up, it's in the drop down for export selected items. So just search on it here. There you go. So this exports your data here in the format that an advanced timesheet import is expecting in Sage with the right columns. Okay, so look, some questions disappeared here. I feel like Christy's been tapping away.
I answered them, or we answered them live.
Thank you very much. I was just concerned that they just vanished. No, thank you.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
Indeed. Oh, Nihal says, I have the same question as Bruce. Can you add in the additional cost for each employee, like national insurance, tax, pensions, So you can get true labor cost versus sales. You can't for those specific like individual elements, but what you can do, let me go back to my account here, is in the locations settings. You can do this on a location by location basis. Under the scheduling tab, you can apply and report on costs. And the explanation is here is what that means. It doesn't apply when you export the data, but for scheduling purposes, if you want the true labor cost versus sales, you can add a percentage over and above people's pay rates, say 7% or whatever, so that you do get at least a rough extra amount for your national insurance taxes, etc. Yeah, good question. I think that's it.
I think so. Is this the first time we've cleared all the questions in a deputy webinar? It's pretty awesome.
It must be close, yeah. Let me stop the screen share now. There we go.
All right. Well, do we have a poll? I think we do, don't we, Gary? To launch?
That is very well reminded. Yes.
All right, perfect. So right now I'm going to launch a poll, just a bit of feedback, whether or not you enjoyed the webinar, what you'd like to go over in the future. So if you're still on the webinar, I'd appreciate if you guys could throw your feedback in there and we can see it in real time as well.
Yeah, thanks, guys. And it's just 4 very quick questions. You don't have to type anything. You literally just have to click on your preference. It will take you under 10 seconds, I would imagine. It was very, very helpful feedback to us so that we can, tailor these as much as physically possible so that everyone gets as much value out of them as possible. Let's have a look. Yeah, what we want to see is 100% on satisfied.
That would make my day, guys.
Yeah, we're extremely ego-driven here. Thank you. So, yeah, we love to see. Oh, look, they found the level and depth of content just right. Oh, not everyone's delighted. Okay, well, we know who you are, and
we're kidding. Of course, we're going to improve our content to make sure that we make everyone satisfied through all of our webinars.
These are anonymous, yeah, so don't worry at all. It's just very much for our own interests, so that we can improve. That's all we want to do. Great. Okay, we're just going to give it a little more time, just maybe 1 extra minute, because 79% of people have voted. 81% have voted. Come on, there's literally 6 people, I think, that are still on the call.
This feels a bit like a game show where we're waiting for our poll results, doesn't it?
Nearly the 87%. Oh, come on, guys. Can we get over 90? I swear, the more people that vote and put your preferences down, the better caliber of future events we can run.
I think we're so close. We only have 3 more people. Oh, is it?
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, I'll cap the poll there. That's really, really helpful. In fact, I'm going to do a little screenshot from you. Okay, sorted. Thank you, guys. That's really, really helpful.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining. I hope you guys have a great rest of today, and we really appreciate your feedback as well as your participation in this webinar. So just as a recap, we will be sending over a recording of this webinar as well as a deck with the recap steps that we went over in our presentation today. And yeah, as always, please feel free to check out our deputy training portal. That's where all of our training materials live, as well as our historic, or not really historic, but past few webinar recordings live as well. So if you have any questions on scheduling, leave management, we've got you covered there. All right. Well, thank you guys. Have a great rest of your day and have a great long weekend.
Bye now.